Hi, everybody. Welcome into the TNF Club from the Irish NFL Show in partnership with Pundit Arena. Welcome in, gentlemen. I'm here this evening with Colin and Brian. Lads, pleasure to have you on. Welcome in.
Thanks very much. It's been a fortnight's worth of activity. It feels like in just a week because there have been so many stories. There have been the games. There has just been. I mean, I've been on. I think refreshing Twitter consistently.
Yeah, it feels like those kind of crazy weeks in the off season between free agency and the draft and the build up to the draft without the games. But the past week and a half, 2 weeks, we've had the games, and then we've had conversations about games that haven't been played and when they're going to get played, and then the knock on effect for the week that's coming and potentially other weeks within the season. It's mind blowing.
Mind blowing, and what's even more mind blowing, and we'll talk about it in a second. There was a game on a Wednesday night, a game that was moved 3 times, so it'll be interesting to talk about that as a Broncos fan. I'm only joking, but talking about mind blowing as well, we're also going to go to the subject tonight of the future of this NFL season because we are getting close to the end of the season. Come Sunday, the NFL season will be 75% complete in terms of the regular season. So we are getting close to that conversation, and we're going to have a very frank discussion about that in a few moments. First of all, though, Colin, let's start with you, man. The Steelers moving to 11-0 last night. First of all, your thoughts on the game. Secondly, really quickly, man, are the Steelers good value for 11-0, and do you see them as the main challenger in the AFC based upon their record?
Um, well, that is they did enough last night, and they have done enough throughout the season. A strange game, a game that never really got going. It felt the all of the uncertainty surrounding the game seemed to impact the players. I imagine not being able to train, wondering when it was going to be played. The fact that the Steelers didn't know who was going to be there for the Ravens. The fact the Ravens didn't know who was going to be there for the Ravens didn't allow for much, game planning. It never felt like the Ravens were really in it. I know they had obviously the touchdown pass towards the end, but look, Big Ben put it up there. Washington came down with it. I mean, Ben has said that's his go-to guy if he's got to put it up there. And it was I just never felt that the Ravens could really push them. The worry for the Steelers is Bud Dupree's ACL injury. He's an enormous loss to them because they've been so good at getting to opposition QBs, and that'll definitely hamper them. I I think all you can say is they have beaten what's been put in front of them. So at this point, I think you have to say that they are they're up there. I think the Chiefs are a better team and will show that when it comes to the crunch. But it's very easy, I think, to take pot shots at the Steelers and say they've only beaten so and so and so and so. What could they do? Their schedule is the schedule, and look, you got to give Tomlin and the coaches credit there, because even with that schedule, looking at it, nobody had them to go 11-0 to start the season.
Absolutely, and it's going to be interesting to see how they finish the season. Obviously, saying at the start, 75% complete this Sunday after, in terms of the regular season. The Bills are playing the Steelers, Brian, in a couple of weeks. Just your quick thoughts, man, on just your quick thoughts on that game last night. Was it a classic, or were you
I
not
think we
bothered?
were all left disappointed in years gone past. You'd look forward to a Ravens Steelers game because of obviously the rivalry, and you might get a low scoring game, but you certainly feel like you've watched a really good game between two good teams. But last night's game was poor. Ravens are banged up. Thought the Steelers were very sloppy, generally on offense in particular. 3 red zones in the first half. Didn't take any touchdowns out of it. Wide receivers were dropping the ball. I felt as the game progressed, at some stage they would capitalise and they would hit that long ball and they would pull away earlier than what they did. But look, they've got to win. I don't think anybody ever expected anything else. And Collins made the point around the throw at the end, which felt like a bit of a Hail Mary type scenario where Big Ben put it up and he trusted his wide receiver to come down with it. But the Ravens, looking at their running, they've still got an opportunity to make the playoffs. I looked at the 5 games they've got left today. They've got some teams in the NFC East. They've got to play the Bengals, and they still have to play the Browns. And 9 times out of 10, with Jackson playing, they do take care of the Browns. So they've still got a chance if they get players back. The Steelers are rolling, but I'm not sure whether they're going to be the team that reaches the Super Bowl in the long run.
I have to say I agree with that there, and I think we could talk about that until the cows come home. There's plenty of games that have been moved and stuff, so we'll try and do as many shows as we can. If there are games, and there's games next Tuesday as well at the minute, and we'll come into that on the weekend's coverage. Let's look at the NFL, gentlemen. As I said previously, I've said it 3 times now, 3/4 of the way through after this Sunday in terms of the regular season. I think first of all, I think it has to be said, Colin, it's impressive they've got to this point. I think we're obviously biased as Broncos fans in regards to maybe some decisions that have been made, but I think we're man enough or adult enough, to get over it. We're sort of grown up in that sense. What's your thoughts on the rest of the season? Because mine, and obviously Brian as well, but Colin, you first, man. Mine would be very much in the sense of repeating what Chris Collinsworth said last night. Because Chris Collinsworth last night mentioned that he would not be surprised if the NFL went straight into a bubble 3/4 of the way in, thinking that this could be the right time to can it, take a couple of weeks. I just can't see it happening. I mean, what do you think is going to happen, Colin, over the next few weeks? Because this is a huge few weeks. I think this is bigger than the playoffs now because they need to get to that point. And it's not just a matter of getting into a bubble. It's the whole transition into a bubble as well.
Well, I think we have the past couple of weeks are obviously not where anyone wants to be. I've said before, I said it at the start, you have to have a contingency. I don't think people have said press pause. I don't think you can press pause without doing anything else because you'll be in the same position in 2 weeks. But I don't know if there is the appetite to take all 32 teams into a bubble. I really don't know if that exists. I can't imagine the Jets players or the Jags players are really going to want to at this point. What's in it for them? Potentially maybe losing the remainder of their wages. That's a pretty big incentive, but that's about it. So it definitely puts them in a tough spot. Because when you see the schedule move so much, that has huge impacts. And pushing a game, it's great. You can say, oh, we'll push a game to Monday, we'll push a game to Tuesday, we'll push a game to a Wednesday, but that impacts the following weekend schedule, and that knocks out another team, which has an impact on the following week. So I think it is one to really keep an eye on. And look, I imagine every team is going to see what happened with the Broncos and going to say we don't want to be in that position. We were graced by the commissioner on the game last night. I'm still a little unsure as to what exactly the league's plans are, but I hope they come up with some sort of contingency, because the last thing we want is going into playoff football, and also, I mean, these games that we're coming into now down the stretch where the battle is on for those final playoff berths, that all of a sudden, you have teams like the Broncos who are without an entire position group. I don't think you could do it if it was offensive linesmen, but we don't want to see anyone else who's like having to put out, sort of running backs at tight end or something like that. So I think it's obviously a concern because the case numbers are the way they are, but I don't know if the league wants to go with the bubble. So we have to wait and see.
Yeah, I've got a couple of points on this that I don't even think has been discussed anywhere, and I think people are kind of losing track of certain things that could happen. So just for the point of Goodell, he didn't push back free agency in March when everybody was kind of, when the pandemic really struck and everybody was saying it was inappropriate to proceed with free agency. Everybody said, sure, you can sign players remotely now, you don't need to get them in the facilities for the medical. Then they pushed for the draft to be pushed back. He didn't agree with that. He went with the draft. By and large, it was a success. and now they're pushing for a week 18. And to Colin's point, as the games are dropping off and the additional pressure of making sure the schedule is done per week, the likelihood is you would look at a week 18. But if I was a 4 seed, and this is the year where last year we had the 2 number 1 seeds go to the Super Bowl, I can't see for the life of me how the number 1 seed will make the Super Bowl. And I'll use the Steelers as a case in point at the moment because they're unbeaten. The likelihood is they may pick up that number 1 seed. They're playing the Browns in week 17. With the needle that went last year with the helmet situation with Myles Garrett, you would imagine that come that game with Browns potentially having to win to get into the playoffs. If the Steelers have that number 1 seed wrapped up, Tomlin is going to pull players. He's not going to have any situation where you could see players get banned, any brawls, any players getting injured because of dangerous hits. He's going to pull the players out. So that's week 17 in my book where majority of the Steelers players won't play. If they have a week 18 scenario where other games have to be, there's a backlog, the Steelers potentially wouldn't play that week. Then the following week is the wildcard weekend. The Steelers would not play that week because they're number 1 seed. The Steelers would then step into the playoffs. Potentially 3.5 weeks since they played the last game. What do you do for those 3 weeks with those players? Do you put them in the bubble from the minute they finish the season against the Browns and you say, guys, you aren't playing for 3 weeks, but you have to remain in the bubble? Or do you allow them to be at home in their comfortable surroundings until there's a decision made on that wildcard game? And if you're having watched last night's game, and they were sloppy last night because they hadn't played a game in the bones of 2 weeks, how are they going to be going into a playoff game nearly a month after they played? I don't think that's even been thought of. I will
not even that, Brian. Like, you can't just set up. You can't go, right, everybody in. You have to get them in, let them do the self-isolation period, which I'm sure they'll try and bullet and say it's 5 to 10 days now when it's realistically 2 weeks. You can't just, they'll have it over a month off in that sense.
Yeah, that's why I don't think a week 18 is feasible. It sounds like it's the practical thing to do. I just think they will just do their utmost and they'll keep running with it. And if it means week 17 having games, week 17, ideally what they want to do is any playoff permutation, they have the same teams playing at the same time to give the equality to every team that has an opportunity. I just don't think that's going to be there this year. I think you'll see coming into early January, week 17 will involve games Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then you actually might see more playoff games on the Monday, because we never get playoff games on a Monday anymore. But obviously we may do this year because there's the extra game. But I see a scenario where you might see at 5 o'clock, at 10 o'clock air time on the Monday of the wild card. And then it just keeps on rolling because the following week you can't have a team playing on the Monday, playing on the Saturday, potentially in the playoffs. It's a crazy situation. But how do you go about it? A week 18 in my eyes just doesn't work.
I think you're right in saying it's a crazy situation. Colin, like, the whole thing, that's the size of the league in comparison to other leagues. Looking at Major League Baseball in the States, what they done was in the playoff situation, they had one stadium, which worked for a smaller roster size. They actually found a way to let fans in Texas, which worked perfectly for them. But the reality is the league are not going to be able to find a way in a situation where it's going to help all sides. Personally, for me, I don't think we get to week 17. I don't. I think whenever you've got commentators, you're not going to agree with that, but I'm just being honest. When you've got commentators talking about it on TV, they're getting paid by, obviously the broadcasters who are working side by side with the NFL. Did you see Mike Tirico's face last night whenever Collinsworth said that? As in, shut up, don't tell him. I'd say 2 weeks, that'll do. And I think, like, if that does happen, and I think it's a decent conversation to have, because even if it does happen, where are these draft picks going? Is there going to be like a lottery like the NBA? There's no fairness. I mean, would that mean maybe the Jets might not have no number 1 pick because they haven't played out? And you're spot on what you're saying, Brian. Regardless of when a bubble might start, they're not going to want to have all 32 teams. It's going to cost them a fortune. And the size of the teams, the size of the states, they're not going to have one bubble. It's going to be spread across two or three sites at least. I
don't see any scenario, and Colin alluded to it earlier, where there's any appetite for majority of the teams. Even the teams above the lower teams in terms of the Jags and the Jets, even the guys who've only won 4 or 5 games, with the exception of the NFC East, the guys are just completely out of the picture. They're not going to, they're looking at this stage going, we've got a month to go, let's just get through the games, and then the season's over. If there is a bubble, it will be when it's in the playoffs. But as you said, you
Colin,
made a valid point. Sorry, Michael.
yeah.
How quickly can you organise a bubble? Because you don't get a couple of weeks, with the exception of the fourth seed,
It took
to
the
get
NBA
ready.
2 months to organize it, and then another month to actually get it set up. And that's a team, 5 players on a court at once against a huge roster with 200 staff. It's not going. This is not going to be a quick fix. And Brian, you've also got the situation where you've got a president coming into the states who could lock the whole thing down. There's 270,000 people dead in the states. There's one person dying per minute in the states. Now he could lock it down. He could. Like we could be looking at a Paddy's Day Super Bowl with.
I know, but he's not a naive president either. So I think he knows his very first piece of business is not to lock down the Super Bowl, because he knows how much that means to the American sporting public in America, and he's not going to go down that road. Well, it might be the right thing to do, but he's not going to do it.
Colin, what's your thoughts, man? Obviously, I think what I said is quite. Like, I love how we all have different opinions here. I genuinely think we're not getting the distance. I don't think we will. I would love it if we did, but you can see what's going on in the States now. It's all over the place with some teams. Maybe the best thing would be to just take stock and look at some of the divisions that are wrapped up already, and maybe have a play-in tournament, in the sense that some teams go to the bubble and some teams just say, you know what, that's us for the year. And there's a draft lottery. The Broncos get number 1 pick, and we get Trevor Lawrence. Sound good?
I knew there was an ulterior motive.
Yeah. I like it when you put it like that. I just don't think it happens. I think a lot. There's what Mark is, or what Brian is saying. There's so much, like, to back that up. Roger Goodell does what Roger Goodell wants. This is the behemoth of sports, okay? The only thing bigger is FIFA World Cup. Apart from that, nothing comes close to the NFL season. It will continue as long as they can do anything to make it happen. I mean, Thanksgiving plans. They found a way to move those games. I think they will endeavor to do whatever they can, because the potential for team, if you don't play out, you get into all sorts of do you weigh the games, is that how it's decided, because or is it just done? Like, how do players get paid? Don't forget, we're in a situation where the players signed an agreement that said no play, no pay. So if those games don't take place, are you saying that, like, a quarter of their wages are going to be gone? None of this is easy, because obviously the case numbers being what they are, and when you see the number of players out for the Ravens, the Broncos, and different players missing here and there every week. But I think that the league have obviously made a decision to try in any way that they possibly can to keep the show on the road. I think that's what they will endeavor to do. They it seems like they have updated the COVID protocols almost on a weekly basis, sometimes twice a week, or even 3 times a week. That's caught certain teams out.
Or a Saturday, Colin.
Or on a Saturday, but it's about ensuring the games go ahead. And the more I think about what Brian said about a week 18, there's a lot of truth to that, because, like, if how would you ensure players retain their fitness and retain that competitive edge? We've seen that sometimes.
Yeah. So, that's one thing I wanted to add in, Colin. Sorry, I like the NBA, whenever they went in the bubble, albeit different sport, smaller roster sizes. Obviously, COVID happened. They were in the middle of their same amount of time in their season. Got 3/4 gone. They then had to go and do a whole preseason again. You can't just. This is the whole thing, right? You can't switch it on and off. You can't say that, we might have a bubble. We might not. Of course, they're going to have a bubble. We all know they can't just go, right, let's go. Every state's different. So they can't just go, yeah, they're obviously going to have a bubble. I would say there's one set up, ready to go from next week if they really needed it. Seriously. I would say there's one ready to go if, God forbid, it got really, really bad. But yeah, they're probably dragging themselves at the heels trying to get to week 17, Colin.
There was, sorry, Colin, jumped in. When last off season, when we were coming slightly towards training camp start, and they had the owners meeting, and Goodell stressed to every owner, 31 owners and one person who just plodded along for the Broncos. He kind of just called out the fact that this season is going to be like no other. I think everybody has to brace themselves for the fact that things are going to happen during the season that we've never seen before. And the general consensus coming out of that meeting with all the owners being interviewed on NFL Network and all these other local stations was they just accepted that things may go for us this season and things may not go for us this season. And overall, we just have to accept that this season will be like the other, and maybe potentially next season, when there is a vaccine in place, that we just go back to the normal NFL season that we're used to. And I think that's what Goodell is working towards. He's working towards, let's just get 17 weeks out of the way. If teams have to play with a makeshift team, Broncos last week, who knows? It will be someone else at some stage. I can't believe that we're going to see the last 4 weeks without somebody feeling the strain of another COVID situation and players out. And then we get to the playoffs. If he gets his bubble, or if you get your bubble, Michael, because you seem to be the one who's really advocating for it more so than the rest of us, we still get great football in January.
I think, lads, do you know what? Let's leave it at this, right? Colin, starting with you. Looking at what's happened over the last 6 months, and the fact that the NFL had a 5 to 6 month head start on the NBA and MLB and the Premier League and different leagues, should the NBA have entered into a bubble? Sorry, should the NFL, Colin, had entered into a bubble even in October with a shortened season, based on what they know now? Colin, yes or no?
How do you shorten this?
You could do it. No, but you could take one divisional game away each team. Take 4 games off them. No bother whatsoever.
But it definitely impacted the NBA, right? I'm not a particularly big basketball fan. I keep an eye on all sports, but I'm not particularly. But it did impact. Everyone says it impacted, so I can see why the NFL didn't want to do it. That you want to have the players have as much normality as they can in order to try and have as normal a season as you can. I think you might ask me that question in 2 weeks and I might say, yeah, they really should have done that. But I can see why they made the decision that they did at the beginning. I get it.
When we keep talking about this week 18 scenario, I never believed they would shorten the season, because that week 18 scenario is really what they want in the long run. They want that week 18 in a normal season. So they want more games, Michael, rather than reducing it. Was crazy reasons why they'd have to reduce it. The bubble, potentially, yes, they should have done that earlier in the season, but they were never, in my opinion, never going to reduce the games. And I still don't believe they will. We will see every game get played, whether they're on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, maybe Fridays.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Scoregami situation. Lads, just finally, Colin, if there is a bubble, what city is it in? Go, guess.
Yeah, if there was to be just one bubble,
yeah,
surely you'd look to put it just like in a place that's as accessible as or that's as fair as anyone. You don't want to put it too far to the east, too far to the west.
Put in the middle, Denver.
You could Denver. What about giving it to the NFL? What about Peyton's favorite place? Why not build it in Omaha? If you build it, they will come.
What about a city, Brian, that has loads of hotel rooms and a stadium beside the airport? Vegas.
There's not going to be one bubble, in my opinion. If you reach the playoffs, they will have 14 bubbles, and each team will have their own bubble. And I know that sounds even more difficult to organize.
That's crazy,
but you have to bear in mind, where's the balancing act? You put a team in a city that's predominantly cold that time of year. The team who's used to playing in hot weather, Tampa, for example, which will get mild weather in January, will say, what am I doing here training in the cold?
Sure, 3/4 of the Tampa team wasn't playing for Tampa last year anyway, so they wouldn't know what.
I know, look, it's just the point I'm making. I think they will try to keep the team as close to their facilities as possibly can, and literally the case of that hotel and that hotel only is for that team, and they literally go from there to the facilities and back every day until they're knocked out of the Super Bowl. And for the Giants, that means they're going to have a very long January and early February until they get down to Tampa.
April. Well, look, my guess is that field and Friday Night Lights that they built in 2 days. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Gentlemen, it's been good chatting to you. We'll see you on Sunday for the Irish NFL show. Big week ahead in the NFL. Thank you very much for joining us all. You can check us out on the Pundit Arena Facebook page, on the Irish NFL show on Twitter, and on Facebook. Feel free to get in touch with us with any comments. Colin, Brian, thanks for your time, lads, and enjoy the no game tonight.
Thanks, Michael. See you on Sunday.